What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. My name is Leslie, and today we are going to talk BookTube SFF. So before the pandemic, the BookTube SFF categories were announced. The month of April was designated for us to read the books if we haven't already, so that we could begin voting on May the 1st for those categories. But the pandemic has pushed that back a little bit. Voting has not yet started, but I still kept to my schedule for reading the books in the two categories that I wanted to vote in. And those two categories are science fiction and debut. So the first category I want to talk about is the debut category. And the three books that are in that category, we've got A Memory Called Empire by R. Katie Martine, This Beautiful Book, Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and finally we have The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Haro. So the first book I read out of this category is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. It is the first book in a series. I am eagerly awaiting the second book, which comes out June 2nd, and that is Haro the Ninth. This book was so much fun to read. There are so many characters. It can get very confusing. There is a list of the characters and what house they belong to in the beginning for you. I had my own little notes that I had made because each character has several names they go by. I do think it would have been a little easier to follow if the author had included the house, the full name each time she referenced them. Like Gideon the Ninth. Gideon belongs to the ninth house. I think that would have made it a little easier to keep up with because there are 9 houses and you have 2 to 3 characters from each house and they are all a part of the story. Briefly, it is the 9 houses from 9 different planets in this empire. Each house receives an invitation to send their necromancer adept and their cavalier to participate in trials in order to possibly be raised to the title of lictor. And of course, it is a very coveted title. They all want that honor. They're participating in the trials on the planet of the first house. So the trials are not meant to be a competition between the houses per se, but that's exactly what they turn it into. And then bodies start turning up. So it becomes a whodunit. It is described as a science fiction book. I don't get a science fiction feel from it at all. Literally, this takes place in space. It is very rarely referenced at all that they're in space. I don't consider this a science fiction book. It is still, however, a fantastic story. 5-star read, will read again at least once before June the 2nd. Next up, I read The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Haro, and this one was quite a journey for me. I actually did not start out enjoying this book. It took me about 130 pages into the character development of January, who is the main character, before I actually understood what was going on and before I was able to relate to her as a character. 30 more pages, I was hooked. I was in love. This has become a very, very treasured favorite of mine. I just appreciate the world building, and as the title kind of alludes to you, the 10,000 Doors of January are doorways into other places. It is a story of finding out who you are and where you came from, and the fact that January will not let anything stop her from finding out those things. It is a phenomenal story of love, danger, mystery, exploration. It is so wonderful. And this is a book that I think that every time I reread it, I'm gonna fall in love with it even more. It's also one that I feel that depending on what kind of mood or place you are in your life when you read it, it's going to mean something different to you. I can't wait to reread it again. And the third and final book in the debut category is A Memory Called Empire by R. Katie Martine, and this is my least favorite book of the 3. There is no question this is a science fiction novel. It's a great political mystery rolled up in a shell of science fiction. Think of like a taquito. You've got that shell is wrapped several times around the filling. So the filling is the political intrigue, mystery. and all of the layers of shell is science fiction. And my point I'm trying to make, there's so much science fiction heaped into this story that it almost really hid the best part of it. Now, I love the story of an ambassador from a space station being sent to the city of the Empire to perform her political duty of first finding out who killed the previous ambassador from her space station, but to also prevent the Empire from annexing her space station. And of course, we find out the previous ambassador has been murdered, and she has set out to determine who has murdered him, why he was murdered, and to also try to figure out how to convince the Emperor not to annex her home. It is not fast-paced. It is one, I could not read this book for any length of time. I mean, at most I could read it for an hour at a time, and then I would just be tired, mentally tired. The author uses such strange, unheard of names for things, and it's just like she took the 26 letters of the alphabet and threw them in a Yahtzee cup and spit some out and was like, okay, that's going to be the name of this civilization. This is going to be some of the words to use to describe the different people and whatnot. It just distracted from the story. It overshadowed it. It just made it too difficult for me to sit there and read. It took me so long to read this book because I just kept having to put it down. I know there's going to be a second book in this series. I don't know if there will be more after that. I do know that I have zero interest in reading another one. So the other category that I'm planning to vote in is the science fiction category. Once again, we have Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, A Memory Called Empire by R. Katie Martine, and the third and final book for that category is Recursion by Blake Crouch. Perfect kind of science fiction for me. It is science fiction, but it's not so overloaded that it distracts you from the actual story. Blake used a couple of what I call $10 words. They were, really big words. You have no idea what they mean. He was able to describe the science fiction part of things in layman's terms that I was able to understand and follow, and it didn't overshadow the story, which to me, this is not a science fiction book. This is a love story. So I absolutely loved this book. So I already talked to you about A Memory Called Empire and Gideon the Ninth. Of the three, I do not feel that Gideon the Ninth is a science fiction book at all. Like I mentioned, it took place in space, which is the only reason I feel that it got put into this category. A Memory Called Empire was so overloaded with science fiction that it just all but covered up the actual meat of the story. So my vote for the science fiction category is definitely going to be Recursion by Blake Crouch, hands down. For the debut category, I am going to definitely go with Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I had a very difficult debate between this one and the 10,000 Doors of January, but ultimately Gideon the Ninth won because I enjoyed it more and faster than the 10,000 Doors of January. The 10,000 Doors of January took me almost half of the book before I was hooked into it. I spent the first 130 pages being kind of confused and not relating. I do feel that with more rereads, I could possibly favor the 10,000 Doors of January, but right now, as of the first reading and initial thoughts and feelings, Gideon the Ninth is going to take it for me. And there you have it, guys. Those are the two categories I plan to vote in. That's how I plan to vote. In the comments below, if you are planning to participate in the voting of either of these two categories, I would love to know what your thoughts are, which way you're leaning, if you're comfortable in sharing. All right, guys, have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you soon.